Welcome to The Truth. I'm John Gordon. I hope you're having a wonderful Saturday. If you're in Atlanta, it's 44 degrees right now with light rain this morning. Norfolk is 41, Richmond 39, Pittsburgh, you've got showers and 34 degrees, Nashville 51, and Philadelphia 32. Burr with a high wind watch. Okay, don't get mad at me. Right now, West Palm Beach, 76 and sunshine. Y'all come on down. So we've got a great show for you today. We're going to talk to Mandy Gunasekara. I hope I didn't slaughter that too bad. Mandy is the author of a book, Y'all Fired, A Southern Belle's Guide to Draining the Swamp. Then later we're going to have Mark Adamczyk, and he has written a book called The JFK Assassination Chokeholds. Two great interviews coming up. President Trump has only been in office not even a full month yet, finishing his third week in office. Elon Musk has been dominating the news cycles, and I wonder why. His Department of Government Efficiency is creating quite a stir on Capitol Hill. Democrats are going crazy. Does it appear to you that their reaction is a little overblown? I mean, why would you not want to save our country $72 billion, which is the amount of money that DOGE has identified that it has saved our country as of yesterday? $165 million through terminating 36 consulting agreement contracts across 6 agencies targeting strategic communication and executive coaching for bureaucrats, people and cultural surveys, and climate support services. I mean, as I'm reading those words, it just gives me shock waves through my body, because it reminds me of the 4 years that we have endured and had to listen to that kind of crap. $15 million for terminating 3 DEI training grants, more shockwaves. $46 million canceling DEI scholarships in Burma. An appropriate use of my tax dollars? I don't think so. I don't believe these things were approved by Congress. Now, in a broad sense, they were, but this is mainly people at the USAID bringing their own perverse political ideology into the forefront and paying for it with your and my dollars. $420 million for canceling current and impending contracts, including DEI contracts and termination of leases for unoccupied businesses. You know, what DOGE has found out is that these bureaucrats enter into contracts and they just start this stream of payments and they never end. And that's why you have a 150-year-old receiving Social Security benefits. The checks kept coming, and I guess the 150-year-old kept cashing them. $250 million to terminate 199 contracts across 35 government agencies for climate change services and workshops. Now, I'm reading a great book on climate change right now, and we're going to have the author on either next week or the week after. And it debunks the whole climate change narrative. $110 million termination of 78 contracts across DEI non-performing media and consulting categories, including one for groundwater exploration and assessment in the Islamic Republic of Mauritania. Anthony, do you know where Mauritania is? You didn't take geography in high school? Anthony, our producer, sitting over here like a deer in headlights. He doesn't know where Mauritania is either. $30 million termination of 12 consulting contracts at GSA and the Department of Education, including $23 million for digital modernization program management office support. What in the hell is that? Digital modernization program management office support. $3 million for terminating 12 underutilized lease cancellations. Much of the money has tracked right back to the U.S. Agency for International Development, also known as USAID, which has witnessed thousands of employees being reduced to just 290 foreign service officers and civil servants. They had over 10,000 people. Now they've got 290. I mean, who doesn't want to be on the right side of this? These Democrats, they are so incompetent and inept. They still have not figured out why they lost, and it's because of this very type of thing. And then they come up with all of this vernacular. Elon Musk bad, Orange Man bad, Trump bad, an existential threat to democracy, while they have been destroying our democracy. USAID spending included $2 million for funding gender transitions in Guatemala, $6 million for funding tourism in Egypt, $20 million funding new... Jesus. Anthony, do you have an oxygen tent? No, I'm not going to make it through this. $20 million to fund a new Sesame Street show in Iraq, $4.5 million to combat disinformation in Kazakhstan. Oh, I wish I wasn't on the radio. I'd tell you what I really think. DOGE has also touted cuts in other categories, $4 billion in annual savings at the National Institute of Health. In addition, DOGE detailed $182 million saved at the Department of Health and Human Services by terminating administrative expenses, quote unquote, that didn't really have anything to do with healthcare programs. Musk, DOGE organization has also performed a buyout for federal workers, and now 60,000 federal workers are going to be leaving their job over the next 8 months. Praise God. Hallelujah. Donald Trump is doing exactly what we asked him to do and why we voted for him. And now the Democrats just keep making stuff up. They just keep saying how this is going to wreck federal programs and is going to deprive people of necessary health care and vital federal programs that they are dependent upon. And that is not true. They've just gotten rid of the waste that helps no one. No one that we know of. But mark my word, ladies and gentlemen, when someone responds in the way these Democrats have responded, there is something lying beneath the surface that they don't want you to see. That's what I suspect. And you know, if you're a listener of the truth, Big John's been right pretty much most of the time. And I suspect, and I'm not trying to say, look how smart I am. I just want you to believe me. I just want you to have faith in me. That's the only reason I would tell you that I've been right on things like the JFK assassination, which we're about to get some truth on. We'll talk about that some more in a moment. And with our second guest today, Mark Adamczyk, has written a great book on it. And the United States Congress has got a committee that is working to review all the files, and they're going to release them. Oh, happy day. So why are the Democrats responding in the way that they are? Why are they becoming completely epileptic and insane over it? Why would Maxine Waters go to the Department of Education and demand to be let in so she could confront Elon Musk? Well, my suspicion, without direct proof, is that they're in on the deal. I think they're on the take. Now, how this money gets funneled back to them, in what form, and how they siphon it off, I do not know. But I do predict that that is the next shoe that will fall. I believe that we will discover that a lot of these people, and Republicans too, this is not a partisan issue. I firmly believe that there are members of Congress and people in our government, bureaucrats, and don't forget the media. Politico got something like $8 million in subscriptions. Politico Pro that they sold for between $75,000 and $100,000. And a lot of the information, a lot of the proprietary information in the Politico Pro subscriptions could have been found in the Wall Street Journal. This federal government, I will say it again, and I will continue to say it until the sunshine has disinfected the rot that exists inside the Beltway. It is a community comprised of special interest, where people are on the take, where we have been lied to as the American public, and President Trump's going to expose it with the help of Elon Musk, and then they're going to start doing forensic audits, and they're going to track the money, and I predict that it will track back to people in our own government who have no right to the money. That's what I suspect. And we'll find out soon enough. If I'm wrong, I'll come here and I'll tell you I'm wrong. It was just gross incompetence. And don't make any mistake, I think that is probably the biggest source of the problem. Oh, yeah, we want to make friends with you, Iraq, where we declared war on your country over weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. So we're just going to kiss and make up and make it up to you. Here's $20 million. Why don't you have a Sesame Street show in Iraq? And Kazakhstan, here's $4.5 million. I'm a bureaucrat, and I'm going to issue the payment. And here's $4.5 million to fund and combat disinformation, which was probably, I believe I read that it was about how to insert pronouns into news stories and to promote their notion of gender identity. I don't know. I don't even understand it. Look, I'm a guy, you're a gal. Why are we complicating it? Some people are somewhere in between. I'm sorry for that cross you have to bear. Some people are born with diabetes. Some people contract cancer. Life can be very hard. And I feel bad for people that are confused about their gender. And I'm all in favor of providing help and therapy to adults to deal with what I'm sure is a very difficult condition. It's a societal condition. It would be tough to be in that position where it is not by choice. And I'm certain that there are a lot of people that are in that position. And I have great empathy for them. Just don't try and normalize the abnormal. President Trump got men out of women's sports, for instance. That was an attempt to normalize the abnormal. We're not doing it. We can be a compassionate country. We can be kinder and gentler. I'm all about it. But we don't have to change our moral fabric in order to do that. We don't have to create policies that are irrational and defy common sense. We do not have to confuse our children and teenagers to advance some sort of a perverted policy that they want to cram down the throats of the American people. You want compassion, you want empathy, you want help, fine, all about it. You want to normalize the abnormal? No, thank you. I don't know what that makes me. Bring it on. Let the insults and the name calling begin. But that's the way I see it, and it happens to be the truth. All right, well, let's get right to our first guest. It's now my pleasure to welcome to the truth Mandy Gunasekara. She has written a book called Y'all Fired, A Southern Belle's Guide to Restoring Federalism and Draining the Swamp, a very apropos title in these days and times. Mandy, welcome all the way from Oxford, Mississippi.
Yeah, it's good to be with you, John.
Well, thank you for coming on. So did you work in the first Trump administration? Is that how you got a dose of Inside the Beltway?
Yeah, I did. And I worked in two roles, one more technical the first few years, and then ended up as the chief of staff at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, really as COVID was setting in. So got a hot and heavy dose of how the deep state operates on both a policy level and then a personnel front.
So what did you observe during your first stint in Washington? And how long were you there?
Yeah, so I actually worked in D.C. after graduating from college. I worked in the U.S. House, the U.S. Senate, kind of bounced back and forth until I got the opportunity to go work for President Trump in the administration. And I started pretty early in March of 2017. And what I found was not only a deep state that wanted to stop the president's policy vision from being implemented, but also a group of people that went out of their way to try to demean, demoralize, and discredit anyone who was working for President Trump. And here was the best example that really opened up my eyes. I was a key part of President Trump getting out of the Paris Climate Accord because of my work in the Senate and a longtime role in international negotiations. Because of my help in helping him get to his final announcement, we were getting out. I earned a lot of enemies, if you will, in the deep state, especially over at the State Department. Later that year, I had been tasked with a small group of folks to go renegotiate a better deal on behalf of the president in Bonn, Germany. Now, mind you, as a Senate staffer, I'd been on these international trips many times before, never thought twice about cross-checking the logistics of where I was going to stay in particular. Nonetheless, I trusted the deep state blindly, a lesson I learned not to going forward, but I get to Germany, get ready to initiate the negotiations, head out to my hotel. The first red flag is it was 45 minutes away from where the actual negotiations were going on, which was typically not the case with all the previous trips I'd been on. The second piece, I showed up, things seemed a little weird. I looked around, and it was a sex hotel. So you had the State Department logistics people put two of the 120 plus U.S. delegation, me and one other female colleague, out in a sex hotel 45 minutes away from the negotiations just to send that message. One, that they disagreed with what we were doing from a policy perspective, but like I said, they wanted to make our life as difficult as possible. So that was one example.
So was Rex Tillerson the Secretary of State at that point?
Yeah, and that was another lesson learned. Rex Tillerson, he was the Secretary of State. We, I still have files, reports, all these things, submitted this information, and nothing happened. I put Rex Tillerson, frankly, in that class of early on appointees that really didn't have the courage to back up President Trump's vision and implement it in the way that it should be. Step one was holding his bureaucrats to account. And anyway, that was one of those instances where it just became very clear that this was a whole new world we were working with. Lessons learned that are informing the early on steps of this administration that's wasting no time putting the deep state in its place. But, there are so many examples of the deep state, anonymous bureaucrats filing frivolous inspector general complaints or starting FBI investigations against political appointees that there's no substance to, but they know it's going to cost appointees tens of thousands of dollars, and that is ultimately their goal. So going in and working in for President Trump in 45, it was a completely different experience than I'd ever had in Washington, D.C., and made very clear that the administrative state is ripe for reform.
Absolutely. So did you report what happened to you in Bonn to your superiors or anybody in the State Department, and what was the response you got? And do you think they were trying to just intimidate you, or do you think they were trying to set you up to maybe photograph you walking in or out of this inappropriate hotel? I mean, what was their motivation? What were they trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think it was a form of sick bullying or harassment. I mean, I really think they were trying to intimidate us. And we reported it immediately. I mean, I was there for about 30 minutes, immediately contacted my chief of staff, who he got to work. But interestingly enough, the people on the ground, the State Department, of all the hotels in all of Bonn, Germany, none were available. And so we had to spend, and I say we because it was one other female colleague that was with me. We spent one night there. And then the next day, I ended up booking our own room because the State Department, again, delayed doing anything to get us out of that situation. And when we confronted them, because the next day you're with these people, you're negotiating in a room, you're doing the work on behalf of the president, you could just tell that it was a funny joke to them that they didn't take seriously, and that they were really doing it just to try to intimidate us and stop us from doing our job.
So did it have an opposite effect, perhaps? Did that make you more resolved to see President Trump's agenda through?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things where, it really, I'm not looking through the rose-colored glasses anymore when I'm walking into work. And so it actually served as a motivator. That's kind of been my response to all sorts of barriers and obstacles throughout my whole life. I think these people underestimated me a little bit, and we got to work, not just then, but then in helping shape the president's policy decisions for this next go-round. Certainly have been working in the background to make sure he was ready to go. And getting out of Paris, I mean, that was a day one action. There's a lot more work on that front, but it really is, it is a culmination of not just me, a lot of people who are on the receiving end of that type of mistreatment and disrespect, that it's not about us. It's about who we represent and who we're working for, which is the offensive part about it. Anyway, it's motivated a lot of us to be ready, and that's why you're seeing this administration waste no time and get to work really from day one, making massive reforms, putting the bureaucratic state in its place, and changing policies that are counter to the president's America First vision.
It's just hard to believe that the members of President Trump's administration, which would include the entire executive branch, would be working against him. And you'd think that they would be worried about losing their jobs or facing some sort of recriminations, a demotion, a transfer. Did any of that happen in the first term?
No, and that's a key problem. There was no accountability. And so much of the way that the bureaucracies are designed, I mean, they're layered upon layer. And whether you're talking about holding them to account for mistreatment on a personnel side or an obvious HR violation, or you're talking about getting policy decisions from direction to final work product done, there are so many different elements within an agency designed to slow things down, to reduce efficiency, and the bureaucrats are really good at CYA exercises, making sure that no one can ever come back to them and say, you made this decision, or you slowed this down, or this was sitting on your desk, or you disregarded this important component. They're just designed to insulate the bureaucrat from any degree of accountability. So that's why, part of why I wrote the book and a lot of recommendations, but you're seeing them implemented from day one, these instances where President Trump is in fact going in and firing people because he has the authority to do so. In the first administration, he didn't necessarily understand the degree of that authority, and the people around him, specifically his legal team, they didn't understand the ins and outs of the laws, and unfortunately, like many of us, deferred to the counsel of the people in the various agencies. But, we soon realized we weren't getting fair and good counsel. And so that's why you're seeing over the past 4 years, people wasted no time better educating themselves, learning from those experiences, and being motivated from day one to make these reforms and reestablish a degree of accountability within the bureaucratic state.
Well, I agree with your assessment of President Trump 45. My intuition, I inferred that he was trying to go along to get along, that he was trying to play nice with everybody, thinking that they would come over to his team and support the agenda that the American people said they wanted him to deliver. And I think he was very disappointed. He had a lot of people who I think really set him up, like Mike Pompeo and like maybe his first and second chief of staff, the guy who came from the RNC, seemed like he was more interested in making friends in Washington than he was pushing the president's agenda. And then the second chief of staff, the general, refresh me on his name.
General Kelly.
Yeah, General Kelly. He seemed like a really strong, tough guy, but he didn't seem strong and tough to support his boss. And then, of course, you have Milley, who was a general, who told the president that they couldn't really move all the sophisticated armaments out of Afghanistan because it would cost too much. So they just left him for the Chinese and the Taliban. And then he back-channeled the Chinese in the last days of the Trump administration, saying that don't worry, if the president does anything rash, I'll call you and tip you off. Well, if that's not treason, I don't know what it is. So, I've watched Trump for the 4 years that he was president, from 17 to 20, and then, or 21, and then, of course, the first 4 weeks now of this new administration. I think it's been 4 weeks. Seems like about a day, but my God, has he gotten a lot of stuff done. But he's not operating with any delusions now. Don't you think that he knows how the game is played, and he knows who the loyalists are and who they're not. And he's brought his own team in. These are not Washington insiders. Pam Bondi was Attorney General of Florida. Robert F. Kennedy had never any official role in government that I can recall. Kash Patel, he's proven his loyalty and his toughness. So he's really putting together a cabinet of very smart, independent thinkers who don't appear to be obligated or owe allegiance to anyone other than the United States flag, its Constitution, and the now President of the United States. That's my impression.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I have to tip my hat to the Presidential Personnel Office, that team of folks who has really been helping the president make sure that the people who end up in cabinet positions all the way on down, whether they're confirmed or just appointed, that they are on the America First team. And that was one of the biggest issues in the first go-round, is there were a lot of people who claimed to be Republican, but they actually went in there secretly to stop the president alongside many of the deep state bureaucrats that didn't like the reforms or the policy changes he wanted to make. So this go-round, they really have tightened the filter in terms of people they're willing to consider for various jobs and posts. They're not just leaning into people who are part of what I would characterize the business of Washington, D.C., which is an easier crowd to pluck from. But nonetheless, he's bringing in people who have been loyal to him, loyal to his policy vision, and most importantly, understand that he's the boss, and the only reason he's the boss is because the majority of the American people, they gave them their vote and their faith to implement policies to improve the United States of America in the ways that he laid out, from safety to energy to economic opportunity to new jobs, a better tax situation across the board. And so people understand that now. The ones that are in, it's a slim team, but it's a mighty team, and they are all aligned behind his vision.
Well, and Sergio Gore, who you referenced as head of the Office of Personnel, has been a Trump loyalist. He was basically Don Jr.'s body man. He co-wrote a book with Don Jr., or maybe ghost wrote the book with Jr., and then did a pictorial book with President Trump on Air Force One and pictures of the first 4 years in office that turned out to be a very successful bestseller. And he and Susie Wiles have worked together for the last 4 years at least, if not longer, planning, plotting, and strategizing what a Trump 47 administration would look like. So they're off to a great start, and these are very smart, dedicated, and hardworking people. So I could personally not be more pleased, and I think the whole country shares a sense of optimism just to have a new administration in that actually tells the truth, that is in favor of free speech and the Constitution and the rule of law, and getting rid of lawfare and getting rid of DEI and restoring common sense to governance. It feels like the weight of the world has been lifted from our shoulders. And I don't care how of a blue Democrat somebody is, they have to be in favor of eradicating fraud, corruption, and wasted money in the federal government. And I read this morning that right now the total that DOGE has been able to identify and is in the process of getting back, clawing back, or stopping is $500 billion. Now that's after 3 weeks, and we need to eliminate, their goal is $2 trillion. Well, after less than a month, we're a quarter of the way home. And it should be celebrated. Now, did you ever have any dealings with USAID? I have to confess, I don't think I'd ever heard of USAID until 2 weeks ago. Maybe I had heard about it somewhere in the distant past, but I knew nothing about it. But a lot has come to light in the last 2 weeks. How about you, Mandy? Were you familiar with this organization, and did you have any contact with them?
Yeah, I did. Now, I wasn't familiar with what they really do, which is now being uncovered. They were involved in some of the international negotiations, and then from a geographical perspective, their headquarters were located in the same area as the EPA headquarters. So a lot of the politicals used to get together just by mere proximity. That was my interaction with USAID. But I, like you, and I think most Americans, didn't really understand the true business of USAID. I mean, I believe them when they said that what they were doing was out there basically making friends, to paraphrase, making friends by goodwill and good actions of the United States. But they're a completely different agency, and they have truly been exposed. And then the massive waste and taxpayer money that was used going towards initiatives that not only the American people, the majority of the American people disagree with, but are fundamentally anti-American. I mean, that's out in the open. And it is a beautiful thing to see the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk coming in, and all he's really done is audit just a few agencies. You're right to point out he's merely scratched the surface, and it's amazing to see that we're a quarter of the way there to his original goal. I don't think he's going to have any difficulty meeting that goal because I saw at EPA. Now, when I was there, They had an $8 billion budget. That budget ballooned during the Biden administration, mostly because they were the recipients of billions of dollars that were supposed to be given to various groups in the form of grants. And they did this all under the umbrella of environmental justice. But rank waste, fraud, and abuse, just at an agency that's considered a smaller agency, we've already seen a significant a number come to light with regard to waste, fraud, and abuse, or money that is supposed to be for legitimate policy purposes that's actually going to growing the strength and breadth of the political left. So I think that Elon is going to continue to find trillions of dollars that he can claw back and take away from being in the waste bucket to either the savings bucket or going to something that tangibly improves Americans' lives.
Well, and just not too long ago, Biden said that they had sent $150 billion to the Ukraine, and Zelensky retorted, well, I've only seen $100 billion. Where's the other $50 billion? So it's, I think that before this is all over with, we're going to find out just how bad this federal government is. I think it is corrupt to its core. My dogs agree. They're upset about it. They're barking like hell about it whenever I talk about it. So we also have learned just this week that the USAID was actually funneling money from the NIH, and they were the arm that helped fund the Wuhan laboratory. How bad does it have to get before these people are investigated and prosecuted? And Fauci's got a pardon, but it couldn't be just one guy. I mean, it had to be, all right, I'll be a conspiratorialist. It had to be a conspiracy. It had to be a conscious decision by a number of people that would funnel that much money into a foreign country and a laboratory that is working on gain-of-function research, which was officially frowned upon. For people that don't know, gain-of-function research is code word for tinkering with the human condition. That's God's job. That's not some bureaucrat in Washington, Anthony Fauci and gang. And you know, the Rand Paul has been livid about what has happened. He exposed him in Senate hearings and told Fauci that he was lying to the American people. And now, as we learn more and more information, we find that what the conspiratorialists believed was actually true all along. And so you know, conspiratorialists, sexist, misogynist, racist, homophobes, figure out, I've run out of ist, but all the ist are just, in my view, and Charlie Kirk's, by the way, who I had on the show a couple of months ago, view as one big manipulation to get us to shut up. Nothing to see here, move along. Well, I'm sorry, folks, it's a new day. So there are a lot of buzzwords that float around when you talk about Washington insiders. You hear about the establishment. You hear about the intellectual elites. You hear about permanent Washington. You hear about the deep state. Do we put this all in one big bowl and mix it up and that's inside the Beltline? Or do you dissect it into other slivers where some are less demonic than and subversive than others? No, I'm sorry. Giving grants to men in South Africa, $5 million for men to have sex with each other, I don't know what else you call that. I mean, that's just perverse. And it's not a commentary on gays, but it's a commentary on the use of American taxpayer dollars. I don't care who's having sex. I don't care if it's women with women, men with men, or men with women. It's not an appropriate use of American taxpayer dollars. Similarly, to push DEI in foreign nations and to bring drag shows to foreign nations and to teach gay pride in Kazakhstan. Can you pronounce it? You know what I'm talking about. Kazakhstan, thank you. And what else? To tell journalists in foreign countries how to avoid words that might offend someone's sensibilities that all link back to DEI. I mean, it just makes you crazy.
Yeah, it does. And it just goes to show you that really the federal government under the leadership of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, it became about funding and expanding leftist pet projects. And it had very little to do with improving the lives or helping the American people. Case in point, look at FEMA, our Federal Emergency Management Agency. Towards the tail end of the Biden administration, they made it very clear that they cared more about taking care of illegal aliens that had broken the law to come into this country than they did for the people of North Carolina who lost their homes and everything in a once-in-a-generation type flood. And then the FEMA folks, I mean, all of this came out too as they were walking around handing information for people to access those resources, skipped the houses with Trump signs in them, and they cited it was because of some safety reason. But we know that that is not true. It was simply because they were led by and driven by political ideology. And anyone who fell outside of that could not count on the federal government to help them when they needed, and even worse, likely was on the receiving end of some form of weaponization, whether it was censorship, whether it was frivolous investigations, or some other type of federal harassment. All sorts of Americans had to deal with it, which is really why, you know, where we are today. You have a new group of people that are now a part of the America First vision under President Trump because they saw what was happening and realized this isn't just about conservatives or President Trump. This is anti-American and abuse of power, and this has to change.
Bingo. You are so right, Mandy, and it's not a Democrat or a Republican issue, conservative or liberal. I think these people, whoever they were, Hunter Biden, I just read an article this week that said Hunter Biden was in charge of the White House while his father was president. God help us. Susan Rice, we know that she worked in the White House. But you have people like Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, who's a member of the World Economic Forum, and Klaus Schwab, who says that he wants to have a new world order. And I believe that there was something very much worse than what we were told. I mean, I've gotten to the point where I don't believe anything I'm told anymore by the mainstream media or by members of the Biden administration. And when they tell us, they don't tell us, but the narrative becomes, oh, all these 10 million people that have come over the southern border are really just here to help get Democrats elected. I don't believe it. Because help me understand why military-aged men from China have flooded across the southern border. And tell me why people from Libya and Afghanistan and Iran are in this country. And the arms that have slipped over the southern border and the fentanyl that has come in from the southern border and the northern border and the spy balloon that came down and floated over our country for a week. And Biden courageously shot it down over the Atlantic after the mission was complete. And the Chinese police stations that exist inside of our country in New York, Houston, and LA. It's worse than just ideology. I think that, and you look at the money that Biden took from our enemies, the Chinese, the Russians, Ukraine, Hunter Biden, shaking down Chinese companies for graft, taking $800,000 a year from Burisma, the most corrupt country on earth. I think they were engaged in treasonous activity. You can't say any one of those proved treason, but when you add them all up, What other conclusion are you going to draw? It wasn't about bringing people here to vote for Biden. I think that it was about helping to destroy this country, and I think Trump's onto it, and I think he is deporting them as fast as they can round them up. Thank God. Literally, thank you, God, for intervening and helping save this country.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And look, what would you expect when you look at someone like Biden? The Biden crime family was a very real thing. I mean, so much news has occurred since those last few days, but recall, he literally pardoned his entire family, and he probably pardoned himself. We just don't know about it. Presidents can actually do that on the way out. Someone who knows about these sorts of things was reading me in, but nonetheless, you have a crime family running this country that cared more about padding their own personal pockets and making sure that they were taken care of. You're going to invite similar type of people into this country. And I do think part of the strategy was trying to shore up the political power of the left. But I agree, too. I mean, it was run by a family known for their criminal activities more so than anything else. And then they were also full of people. There were people who worked at the White House that hated this country. They hated everything about it from the beginning. Our founding fathers, the various principles, the Constitution. I mean, they sought to change it all. And so, the pathway for those people to ultimately get what they want is first to burn it all down, to destroy the country as it is, and then try to rebuild it in their version of utopia, which tends to be communist, socialist, and to the detriment of those who aren't a part of that small cabal of folks that are actually calling the shots. And so, yeah, I think it's a combination of all of the above, and I'm so grateful that President Trump was willing to run again. He had the energy to do it, withstood 2 assassination attempts, and then the American people came together and said, enough is enough. We're putting this guy in where the news media, they lost their minds, but the country was good, and he knew what he was doing, and he's promised to make it better. And that's, thank God, like you said, where we are today.
Well, I just read yesterday that President Trump or someone in his cabinet is starting to ask questions about Butler, Pennsylvania, and West Palm Beach. And I have been beating that drum. I refuse to let it go. Our listeners will vouch for the fact that I have talked about it every single week since July the 13th. I know as sure as I'm sitting here that it was a conspiracy. There's ample evidence that there was another guy in Butler, at least one other guy. There's a lot of evidence that someone made their way from Washington to what's his name, Michael Crook's house leading up to the assassination. Ralph had 5 burner phones on him when he was arrested. Now, I want to know, who was he talking to? I don't think he was calling his mother. And so there are so many questions, and I think without conclusive proof, but a lot of circumstantial evidence, like the log where Crooks went to the gun range to practice his shooting. He was accompanied every time. Someone else signed in at the identical same time, but his name has been redacted. I want to know who that person was. So, and Crooks's DNA was, or whoever's DNA, someone's DNA was hosed off the top of the AGR building within minutes of the attempted assassination and them being killed by the counter sniper. And then the body was cremated within 10 days. That's all very strange. They did not treat it as a crime scene. They treated it as a destroy the evidence scene. That's my take on it. So all my tentacles are up. We want truth, and I want President Trump to get to the bottom of that for his own safety. We've got 4 years that he has to be protected. And if the snake is in the basement, we better get rid of the snake. But first, we got to determine who that is. I'm thrilled. I think we're finally going to get the JFK files. I just saw an interview with the chairman of the committee that has been assigned to decide how to release the files. Now, I don't know what that means. I guess somebody's going to have to sift through them and make sure that we're not going to disclose means, sources, and methods, and somebody that may still be alive that did something bad but to help our country. I don't know what the deal is, but just put it all out there. Trust the American people. Don't redact anything. But this lady, who is the chairman of the committee, and I'm sorry I don't remember who it is, said that she has seen files and that there were two shooters in Dealey Plaza. Well, we have been told for 65 years that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, and I have told our listeners for 3 years that I don't even think he pulled the trigger. No paraffin on his body. First thing he said out of his mouth when he was arrested in the theater in Dallas was, "I'm just a patsy." So finally, I think that we're going to get the truth of that, and I want all the secrets to come out. And I just read this afternoon that there is a move afront as soon as Kash Patel gets confirmed that he's going to release the Epstein files. I'm not trying to ruin anybody. I'm sorry that people engaged in immoral activity with somebody that I think was a CIA operative. That would be Epstein. That. He was taking people to his island so that he could photograph them. There were cameras in the bedrooms, or cameras in his bedroom that was just 2 miles from where I'm sitting in Palm Beach. The people believe he was CIA. I suspect that he was CIA. We need to know the facts. We need to know the truth. But I think this intelligence agency in our country has completely lost its way. Now, I'm not indicting everybody who works for the CIA or the national, what is it, the NSA, and the other intelligence agencies. I think there are 32 of them altogether. But, you know, when you give someone unlimited amounts of money and they have no accountability and they basically have a license to act outside the law, at least in foreign countries, and then they somehow lose their way and they start acting in the similar fashion inside our country, it has become a real problem. And I'm hoping that John Ratcliffe and the new head of the intelligence services will expose all the lies, all the bad behavior. We get it all out on the table, and then the American people will rightfully become outraged, and we can get real, true, meaningful reform. That will then enable us to reclaim our place as the moral leader of the world. We have lost the moral authority to lead, in my opinion, and I think that Trump's working on getting it back.
Yeah, I agree. And it's long overdue. There's so many questions. I think with regard to his assassination attempts, like previous ones, we don't have the full picture. I do think that President Trump does trust the American people with the truth. He's shown that time and time again. He is one of the most accessible presidents we've ever had. He changed the dynamic when he kept his Twitter account, now X account, and with Truth Social, the information that he has access to, he's going to release to the American people. So I'm glad that the RFK and the JFK assassinations, that
and
they're
MLK.
willing to, and MLK, that they're willing to release that information. I mean, it's long overdue. It should have been released a long time ago. And then as well as the more recent attempts on his life, there's so many questions that matter. I mean, it is obviously about his security, but we can't remember that people lost their lives that just went to attend a rally to go support somebody that they wanted to be president that day in Butler, Pennsylvania. This really is about the American people and it being able to engage in democracy and not do so being fearful of your life or the life of the person who steps up to the plate and is willing to run for the office to change this country for the better. So there's so much at stake. I have no doubt that President Trump will lean and get to the bottom of it and then rightfully release that information to the American public.
Well, I think you raise a very good point. Corey Compouture lost his life in Butler, Pennsylvania, July 13th, 2024. That is murder. And it is a state crime. The federal government has no jurisdiction, no right to investigate that. I wrote the district attorney of that county and said, you are the district attorney. Do your job. Investigate the murder of Corey Competore. And so I didn't get an answer back. I haven't read or heard where anything has happened. I only hope and wait that someone will do their job and go get the truth. And really for President Trump's safety. He is reaching so far and so wide and digging so deep, and he hadn't even gotten started yet. We haven't even gone to we really haven't gone to FEMA. We haven't gone to the Department of Education. We have not gone to the Pentagon, where they can't even conduct an audit. Oh, they're going to give us an audit in 2027 because they can't even audit. BS. That is the biggest bunch of baloney I have ever heard. Get off your bureaucratic fat asses and go do your job, and then you won't need Elon Musk to come in and look under the rug. Do your job. Do the audit. If they had done their job, there would not be a need for DOGE. But it's not because they don't want to do it's not that they can't do their job. They don't want to do their job because this government is rotten. It is rotten to its core. Fraud and corruption reigns. And they've been making payments to people with Social Security, and they're 150 years old. And they start these payments under a contract. The guy who negotiates the contract for the government leaves the government, probably because he got rich. But the payments continue in ad infinitum. Even when the contract, we don't know if it's been performed or it's not being performed, but the money just keeps going out. It is sick. And you've got American people who are living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to buy groceries, fuel for their car, and drugs to get back and forth to work, take care of their family. We've got veterans on the streets of New York, a block from the Roosevelt Hotel, where we have spent literally tens, maybe $100 million providing food, lodging, and a scooter to ride around New York with a daily stipend. It is enough to make you absolutely stark raving mad. And I am mad. And I think the American people are mad. And I'm going to keep beating the drum and supporting President Trump until we can say, okay, the job is done. We're back to normalized, normal times in this country. And Mandy, I just appreciate what you've done and what you are doing. And you've written this book. Where can we find Y'all Fired, A Southern Belle's Guide to Restoring Federalism and Draining the Swamp?
Yeah, the best place is either Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and then you can always follow what I'm doing and talking about with regard to it. You can follow me on X at Mississippi MG.
All right, so Mississippi MG.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Mandy, and let's keep in touch. Keep up the good work. And
thank you.
Maybe I should have had some coffee. I just don't feel like I've had a lot of energy in this interview today. I don't know what's the matter.
Well, there's so much going on. There's a lot to keep up with, but I'm happy to come on anytime.
Maybe I'll just breathe. But we've told you the truth, and that's what counts. Thank you, Mandy. Come back soon.
All right, thanks.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our interview with Mandy Gunasekara. I'm going to keep working on pronouncing her last name. Gunasekara. She lives in Oxford, Mississippi. She's a very nice and grounded person, I think, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. We come to you today on the John Fredericks Radio Network in Memphis and Nashville and Atlanta, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, Morgantown, West Virginia, Richmond, and Norfolk. We're on 22 AM and FM radio stations in those 8 cities, and in Morgantown, there are actually several stations out in and outside of Morgantown, and we cover the entire state of West Virginia. We are also honored to come to you on CDM Press. They have 13 digital spaces all across the World Wide Web, and they advance this simple little notion of truth. That's what they stand for, just like we do. They have been censored. They have been throttled. People have tried to cancel them for telling the truth. Folks, why can we not just join hands as Americans and agree that our lowest common denominator will be the truth? That the truth will guide all of our decision making, and we will arrive at the truth through free, unfettered debate, which is what the First Amendment guarantees every living American. It seems so simple to me. I attended a luncheon just this week with an individual who purveys the truth. He actually has a 501c3 where they defend people who have been censored for telling the truth, or they will challenge institutions that try to censor people who want to share their opinions and speak their truth. It's a wonderful organization. I'll tell you more about it later. But it's such a vital notion in a democracy. You know, if you consider air, oxygen, essential for life, I mean, do you know anybody who doesn't like oxygen? Can you think of anyone who would disagree that oxygen and air is a good thing? And the cleaner it is, the better, without the interference of pollutants. So I use air and oxygen as an analogy for our democracy. And if you believe that breathing clean air is essential for life, it is my belief that free speech is the oxygen of a democracy. Without free speech, there is no democracy. And that is what J.D. Vance went to Europe and told the EU, where he spoke this week. And it created quite a stir. But for people to criticize free speech would be no different for me than if someone were to criticize clean air and somehow decide that it is not good. Well, free speech is essential to our freedoms. Free speech is the oxygen for a democracy, and here is what our vice president had to say.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election. He warned that if things don't go to plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany too. Now, these cavalier statements are shocking to American ears. For years, we've been told that everything we fund and support is in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard. And I say ourselves because I fundamentally believe that we are on the same team. We must do more than talk about democratic values, we must live them.
The EU, you can look at their faces, they just didn't like it. You know why they didn't like it? Because they want to be singularly in charge. They want to be able to control what their citizenry hears and to unfairly, in an unbalanced way, influence what they think. Like that the coronavirus came from a bat cave. They didn't want you to know that it came from the Wuhan lab. And like that the vaccines were good and that you should take them, unquestionably, because the government told you to. President Trump's rolling it all back. He has rolled it all back. And the air that we breathe today is so much cleaner than it was 3 weeks ago. Yes, President Trump. Yes, Vice President J.D. Vance. You are a breath of fresh air. You are fanning the flames of democracy and our freedoms. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So the pace at which President Trump has come into office and the things that he has changed in just 3 weeks are mind-boggling. And the guy doesn't sleep. He just works, and he works for the American people. And I'm so grateful to him and his administration. He has assembled some of the smartest, most successful people in the United States to work in his administration. And let's just look at some of the things that he has accomplished in such a short time. But you know, we said a moment ago that he has gotten men out of women's sports. He has restored the jobs for people in the military who were fired because they wouldn't take the vaccine. President Trump secured the release of Mark Fogel. He had been incarcerated in Russia for 3.5 years. President Trump is restoring tariffs. Now look, you know, the mainstream media and the haters are going to say, oh, these tariffs are going to destroy the American economy. They're going to fuel inflation. They're going to cause prices to go up. Some of that is true. But here's the deal. In the long run, you got to play the long game. There may be some short-term pain. But these countries that are tariffing our products coming into their country, creating a false economy, a false marketplace, they tariff our products coming into their country so that people will favor buying their own manufactured and made products. Now that's a good policy. It's just President Trump is saying what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And if you're going to tariff us 25%, we're going to tariff your products 25%. Help me understand why that is not sound policy. But you know what's going to happen? This is the long game. Those countries are going to lower the tariffs on American-made goods coming into their country so that we will then lower the tariffs on their goods like China or Russia or Germany. They're going to lower their tariffs, and then we'll lower our tariffs. And President Trump has said, it's tit for tat. If you're going to have a 25% tariff, we're going to have a 25% tariff. If you're going to have a 50% tariff, we're going to have a 50%. If it's 100%, we'll be at 100%. And then what happens? The marketplace gets to decide. Perhaps nothing that the president has done so far is going to have a bigger impact than his new energy policies. And if you want to see a great video, just Google Trump's energy executive orders, and it'll take you straight to the Oval Office with the Secretary of the Treasury, Interior, EPA, and they're rolling back all the Biden policies that put a stranglehold on American energy. Energy affects everything. Literally everything that we buy is in some way related to the cost of energy. Energy is used to make those products. Energy is used to deliver those products. Energy is used to display those products in grocery stores. Energy is used to package the products. Energy is pervasive across our economy. So if you lower the price and cost of energy, natural gas, fossil fuels, electricity, you lower the cost of goods and services. It's just that simple. Trump gets it. The Biden people didn't have a clue. So he is making tremendous strides in lowering the cost of energy, and he is going to get us back to a energy independent nation, which is where we were when he left office. Illegal border crossings, no new laws have been passed in Congress of which I'm aware. Yet using existing laws, President Trump has been able to slow the influx of illegals into the United States at the southern border to a trickle. Biden said he couldn't. The reality is, it wasn't that he couldn't, it was that he wouldn't. But Trump is, and it is working. That is going to reduce the influx of fentanyl, which hopefully will reduce the number of tragic deaths of overdoses as a result of fentanyl. And just this week in West Palm Beach, Florida, the Sheriff Bradshaw, made an announcement. They are not looking for honest, hardworking illegals living law-abiding lives, at least in Palm Beach County. They're only after the lawbreakers, the people who rape, murder, rob, and commit serious crimes are the ones that they are targeting and going after. Now, that might change. We don't know. But for now, at least, that's where the emphasis is. And they have rounded up thousands of them and deported them back to their home countries, which in many cases, like Colombia, where they just open the jail, open the cells and said, okay, you're free to go, and here's a bus that'll take you to the United States where you can cross the southern border. The Department of Homeland Security has also clawed back tens of millions of dollars in funds paid illegally, I hasten to add, by FEMA to house illegals in luxury in New York hotels. It is just absolutely incomprehensible to think what the Biden administration did and the grief that they brought on our country, and to what end. Don't buy the narrative that it was so that they could buy votes. Believe me, I've been to the Roosevelt Hotel in New York. I've talked to many of the residents there. They wouldn't know how to find a voting machine if their life depended upon it. I don't believe that that's what this was about. I believe it is much more subversive than that. At best, they want to change the fabric of America and turn it into a socialist communist state. At worst, I'm not convinced that they didn't want to turn it over to foreign actors like the Chinese. They hate America. But President Trump got Tulsi Gabbard elected Secretary of National Intelligence, or Director of National Intelligence. Robert Kennedy, who we had questions about whether he would get confirmed, is now Secretary of Health and Human Services. And Brooke Rollins has been confirmed as Secretary of Agriculture. And of course, we've got a new Attorney General, and we're on the verge of getting a new FBI director. The Senate passed his name out of committee and is set for a vote. It may have already happened. I don't think it has, but it may have happened. We've gotten rid of a mandate mandating paper straws. Now, you know, some things don't make sense. Other things have a glimmer of some sense. I don't know that paper straws is the answer, but our oceans are littered with plastic straws. It's frankly, it is borderline a crisis. Maybe just not the straws, but all the plastic that have been dumped into our oceans, mainly by the Chinese, and I guess to some extent India as well. And I'm sure that the United States that some of our straws have found its way into the oceans and other articles of plastic. So there needs to be a worldwide campaign not to pollute our seas and our oceans. And so some public service announcement, some warning, do not dump your straws in the ocean or in the public waterways might be an answer to that. 75,000 federal workers, 3.7% of the federal workforce have resigned and will be leaving our government over the next 8 months. Thank you for your service. Don't come back. President Trump will continue to downsize the federal bureaucracy, and he will continue to end wasteful federal spending. So the changes are coming fast and furious. I couldn't be personally more happy or excited about it, and I'm sure that you join me as well. We also come to you on Rumble, Getter, YouTube, and X. Just go to any one of those platforms and search for John Gordon Truth. We'll pop right up. And if you're motivated to do so, please subscribe and like us. We're just 190 subscriptions away from reaching that magic number of 1,000 subscriptions on YouTube. That will then get us more respect by the algorithm. More of our videos will get pushed out to a broader audience, which will get us more subscribers, which will allow us to attract more great visitors and guests, just like we have now with Mark Adamczyk. Well, our listeners are going to be fascinated by our next guest, Mark Adamczyk. He is a lawyer in South Florida, just right across the state from where we are. And like myself, he is a self-described expert on John Fitzgerald Kennedy's assassination. Now, Mark, you don't know this, unless you've been listening to The Truth. Maybe you have. But we have been talking about JFK's assassination virtually nonstop for the last 3 years while we've been doing this program. And the purpose is not to, a benefit, hopefully, is that we'll convince enough people that Lee Harvey Oswald did not act alone and dispel the lone gun theory, but really to expose the corrupt federal government that has maintained this false narrative for the last 65 years. So, Mark, welcome to The Truth.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk about this with you.
So how did you acquire an interest in JFK's assassination?
Well, I was born in the Boston area. My parents talked about the Kennedys a lot. I would say when it really started, we had moved to Florida, and then I ended up going to school for college at Tulane in New Orleans. And when I was supposed to be studying on my, in the business school or whatever, I would sneak over to the Tulane library and read all of the original newspaper clippings from the local paper that covered the Garrison investigation and the trial of Clay Shaw. And I came to learn that a lot of the activities that led up to the assassination in New Orleans were important. And they also, they involved Lee Harvey Oswald. So we can get into that if you'd like. And then, like most Americans, or worldwide, I should say, was fascinated by Oliver Stone's JFK film in 1991. And it's hard to believe, but it's true that that movie had such an impact on the public. At the very end of the movie, in the scroll, it announced the fact, and it was very much a fact at the time, that the files on the Kennedy assassination would be locked away until the year 2029. And that outraged most folks who saw the movie, and it led to action in Congress the next year. Congress unanimously passed the JFK Records Collection Act, which we now see is still very much relevant in the news. We can get into that if you'd like. And so, then I just started reading as many books as I could about the case, both pro-conspiracy and pro-Warren Commission, just to learn as much as I could. And then I became an expert in that law that I mentioned in 2017, when Trump had the opportunity to release the records as mandated by that law. It did not happen, so I wanted to understand why. Biden then issued his transparency plans, they were called. It made the problem worse. And here we are.
Well, Trump didn't do it because Mike Pompeo talked him out of it. Trump was prepared to do it. He actually is one of the very few promises he made in the 2016 campaign that he did not keep. And I love President Trump. There are never Trumpers, and I am a forever Trumper. unless he disappoints, which I don't think he will. But that was one thing that I wish he had not done, i.e. listen to Mike Pompeo. So you want to tell us what your theory of the case is?
Yeah, we could get right to that. So to me, the fascination. Look, I just want to make one comment on Trump's action in 2017. What really happened, and not many people know this, is that it was public at the 11th hour. He said that week in October of 2017, he was excited to release the records, and he was going to do it. I fully believe he intended to do it.
Yeah.
So not only did he get last-minute visits from the CIA, Pompeo, and the like, and other agencies probably, telling him it was a terrible idea, he would endanger the country, et cetera, but that was at the last minute. He also got, whether he read it or not, but we discovered it, there's a legal memo from the Office of Legal Counsel from the DOJ that completely manipulated how the JFK Records Act was supposed to work. It advised the president at the time that he could issue a blanket, wide-sweeping delay and not have to disclose the reasons for postponement, and that's not what the law said. So if you take that, you got that memo at the 11th hour, legal advice, so to speak, which was faulty, combined with the pressure from agencies, you can understand why it was why he did what he did. But I think now, having had a few years to understand it better and probably get better education on it, I think he wants to make some progress on this.
Well, and we were just talking with a guest that we had on prior to you that my belief, my impression was that Trump was trying to play nice with insider Washington, and he was not trying to go and disrupt, and he wanted to win those people over, and so he was trying to placate them on a lot of things. And after they turned on him in the 2020 election and stole the election from him, my considered belief on good authority, I've seen the evidence in Georgia. There's no question that Georgia was absolutely stolen. There was so much fraud. Two numbers guys independently have concluded that 400,000 illegal votes existed just in Georgia. We digress. The point is that he was like me. He was bitter. He was angry. He wanted to get the record straight. Well, now in Trump 47, there is no Mr. Nice Guy. You're either with him or you're against him, and you're either a law follower or you're a lawbreaker. And if you're the latter, there's no room for you in the Trump administration. Kudos, Mr. President. Keep it up. So, but I didn't hear in all of that what your theory of the case is.
Sure. So to me, the key to the case is understanding the period between August of 1963 and, of course, Dallas in November of 63. All right, because there was an unusually high level of activity starting in New Orleans with Oswald regarding the Cuba problem, right? That was an obsession with the Joint Chiefs and the CIA and the anti-Castro Cubans since the Bay of Pigs. Kennedy did not invade Cuba after the Bay of Pigs failed invasion. He did not invade Cuba after the missile crisis in 62. So 63 was a huge deal to finally get something done. You may have heard of Operation Northwoods. This was discovered by the Records Review Board in the late 90s when it was finishing its work on reviewing the records to follow out that statute. And Northwoods was a scheme, Pentagon-sponsored scheme to stage a spectacular event on U.S. soil and immediately be able to have pretext to blame Cuba and Castro. All right. If you look at what happened on November 22nd, 1963, it has all the blueprints. So how do you get there? You go back to New Orleans in August. Oswald had been there since April of 63 on various assignments and activities, all related to Cuba. If you watch the movie that I mentioned, JFK, you'll see it dramatized. His office and his hangout at 544 Camp Street in New Orleans it's all been verified by witnesses. And that was a hotbed of anti-Castro activity. But what was Oswald doing there publicly? He was being portrayed as a pro-Castro communist, leading a one-member chapter of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. So we now know from release of records about Operation Inspel, a CIA operation to infiltrate the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. They wanted to know about it, how it was run, who they could get to discredit and destroy it as a support of Castro. So Oswald was in the middle of all that. He was passing out the leaflets about the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. But the key is the interaction he had in New Orleans was with the DRE, a Cuban student organization that was the most active in the CIA operations at the time. All right, so they had the staged altercation with him. He went to prison. Guess what he did in prison, by the way? I shouldn't say prison, city jail in New Orleans after his public arrest. He got to meet with the FBI for several hours. I mean, what kind of low-level, lone nut, crazy, nobody gets to meet with the FBI after a minor scuffle in the streets in New Orleans? So that also is very relevant about his other activities and assignments. But when he became public in New Orleans on the radio and television as a Castro supporter, and that was all in interaction with the CIA-sponsored Amspel operation with the DRE that I mentioned, he left New Orleans as essentially the perfect patsy already for Dallas. Now, can I say that was part of the assassination plan, or was it just to infiltrate this Cuban organization? We know they succeeded on the infiltration part, the counterintelligence part, but it certainly put him in the right public view for what happened in Dallas. Then you go to Mexico City the following month. Oswald was clearly impersonated in Mexico City in a CIA-sponsored operation. The station, the CIA station in Mexico City, knew that the photographs they had of someone who was allegedly Oswald wasn't him. They asked headquarters for other photos to verify, and headquarters ignored the problem. He was also further portrayed there as being prone to assassination, having allegedly met with an assassination specialist linked to the KGB in the Soviet embassy. So that's a whole nother show we could have on Mexico City, and there's still a lot of mystery surrounding it, but we do know that he left Mexico City and went back to Dallas, so the acceleration of the creation of his legend as a patsy was complete, right? So then on November 22nd, he's in the perfect place at the perfect time to assassinate the president, supposedly. And then what happened? We can get into the details of the case and the shooting and all that, but we know he was in the right place at the right time. He was not on the 6th floor of the depository. That's inescapably proved in our book, JFK Assassination Chokeholds, but he was in the building. So what happened?
Well, he was in the break room. He was seen there at 5 minutes before, 10 minutes before the assassination, and he was seen there very shortly after the assassination, sitting in the same seat, drinking the same Coca-Cola, that the police officer rushed through the break room and asked the manager who was in trail, who is that? And he said, oh, he works here. That's all the attention they paid him. Then they rushed upstairs to the sniper's nest.
Right. Yeah, well, there's witnesses on the stairs that never saw him, and he couldn't get down. Right, it was the only route of exit. So he was not on the 6th floor. And but what did happen, we know we follow his tracks after that and talk about the Tippit and where he was arrested. But the key to understanding what I think happened is within hours of Oswald's arrest, as the suspect in the case, all of the information known about Oswald from New Orleans went worldwide. His radio and TV interviews as being a pro-Castro communist, and that was the immediate propaganda put out there. Where did that come from? The same CIA-sponsored group in New Orleans that had the interactions with Oswald. They could not wait to release this information based on what happened in Dealey Plaza. So that's where you come back to that Northwoods blueprint. It happened, the most spectacular event you could imagine, tragic, and immediately Cuba was blamed. The problem is that Oswald survived November 22nd, and that was not part of the plan.
Oh, you think that Oswald was not supposed to die?
No. I mean, I think he was supposed to be eliminated shortly after the assassination. Yeah, because then he gets arrested, starts asking for a lawyer. What did he say? I'm just a patsy.
I'm a patsy, sure.
Yeah, if you listen to those words, they really matter. He didn't say, I really don't know anything. I wasn't involved in anything. He knew he was involved in something that led to his setup, but he said he was a patsy, and that was a huge problem for the plotters.
So David Talbot, of California author, has written The Devil's Chessboard. We interviewed him on our show 3 years ago. He concluded that the CIA killed Kennedy, that Allen Dulles hated Kennedy. Kennedy fired him from the CIA, yet Dulles continued to operate as if he were still the director from his Georgetown townhouse, and that senior management from the CIA would come and visit with him in his townhouse, and that when Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Dulles was in the CIA command center, some secret place that they've got in Virginia, I believe, observing and choreographing or overseeing the entire operation. I believe that story. Now, Roger Stone has written a book, The Men Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. He thinks that LBJ orchestrated it. I think that the evidence that Roger Stone has developed and the evidence that David Talbot says in his book are not inconsistent with the other. It is perfectly agreeable to me to conclude that they both had a hand in it. Maybe Dulles was in the operational command, but Johnson clearly, I believe, knew about it because he came out of a meeting in Fort Worth the night before and greeted his then mistress, who I have watched on YouTube. You can go Google LBJ's mistress, and she says, and you can evaluate her for yourself for her credibility, that Johnson came out of this room where he met with a bunch of high-powered Texas oil men, and that he was visibly agitated and red-faced, and said, after tomorrow, those SOBs will never embarrass me again. Then we also had another guy who came on The Truth, two people actually, who were in Houston the day before and had wanted to see the motorcade and had run down to the motorcade and missed it. So they went to this dinner club afterwards, and the manager of the dinner club came over and said, hey, I'm out of seats. Would you mind if these two guys come and sit with you? Well, they said, well, I mean, I don't, if you need us to, I guess. And he said, well, they're members of the Secret Service. They were here guarding the president today, and I'd really like to accommodate them. They said, oh, the Secret Service, sure, bring them on over. So they had a couple of cocktails together. I spoke to this guy, and he said that the Secret Service agent, he said he was sorry that he didn't see the motorcade go by, and he said, and the Secret Service agent said, and this is implausible to me, said, well, good that you missed the motorcade today in Houston and that you're not going to be in Dallas tomorrow because Kennedy's going to be assassinated. So I didn't believe the story. I said, well, who were you with? And he gave me the guy's name and phone number, and I called him, and he told me virtually the identical story and corroborated it. And so that, I think that there was a plan. There were also reports that Kennedy was supposed to be shot in Chicago. There's a lot of evidence about that, and then it was going to be Miami. One other little tidbit, and then I'll let you talk. I'm sorry, this subject fires me up. But there was a guy in Miami, and I think it was like 1982, somewhere in there, that told his sons that he didn't have long to live. And they said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, I've talked too much, and they're going to kill me. And he said, well, they said, well, Dad, tell us your life story. And he said that he was a trained CIA assassin, that he was at a CIA camp for assassins, and that Lee Harvey Oswald was there, but that he didn't know why Oswald was there, and didn't really get to know him, but that after Dallas he recognized the picture and understood why he was there. Well, it wasn't but within a month that guy was taken out in a bar in Miami. So then you got E. Howard Hunt, the famed Watergate burglar, who made a deathbed confession to his son, St. John Hunt, that he had actually been in Dealey Plaza on November the 22nd and was part of the CIA cleanup team. Now, nobody disputes that E. Howard Hunt was part of the CIA, and I've listened to the deathbed confession several times. He is a, I don't know, he was old and he was dying, and the way he talked gave me pause. He sounded a little bit off his rocker, but then when you take it into the context of what happened, it sounds very credible and very believable to me. So, Mark, I ask you your theory of the case. My theory is the CIA orchestrated it, they carried it out, that Johnson and Hoover covered it up, and that the mainstream media has been complicit in covering it up for 65 years. And I'll tell you, that guy that worked for Fox, who got fired along with Tucker, he had the #1 show. Tucker replaced him. What's his name? I'm drawing a blank.
I'm not sure.
It'll come to me in a second. But he wrote a book, and he concluded that Oswald acted alone. And when he did that, I just said, "You're part of the deep state."
Bill O'Reilly.
Bill O'Reilly. Thank you very much. I'm old too.
That's the thing. I mean, the books that sell the most are the ones that promote the lone assassin. Oswald did it. The movies, I mean, with the exception of the Oliver Stone movie, they get the most attention, the most sales, don't they?
Well, we're about to find out, and the lady congresswoman who's heading the committee that has been appointed to orchestrate the release of all the files. I read an interview with her this morning. She said that she's seen the documents, that there were 2 shooters in Dallas, and that the files are going to come out, and that she's going to try and push them out with as little redaction as absolutely possible. So I think we're about to find out. I've waited 65 years for the truth. I can't wait.
Yeah, I wrote a letter to her today. In fact, just sent it from my office, offering assistance with that task force, because it's critical that her team and the oversight committee have a clear understanding of how the records collection law is supposed to work and how it's been mishandled and abused since the 90s.
Well, and Tucker Carlson interviewed or spoke to a lady who works in the National Archives, and she said she had seen the files and that that the CIA was unquestionably involved. So I don't hate on the CIA. I hate on the people that did it, and I don't indict everybody who works for the CIA as a assassin of the most popularly elected president up until that time, and absolutely thwarted the will of the American people and our democratic process. But I believe there needs to be accountability at all levels. And I think that we should try these people in memoriam, and we should rip their names off the buildings that we have mistakenly honored them with, and the street signs, and wherever else we can find them, because it was the lowest act of any government, any action of our government that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Well, the more time that goes by, going back to your conclusion, I don't disagree, but the more time that goes by, you can't get away from the cover-up. I mean, the Warren Commission the CIA from day one lied to the Warren Commission. They knew all about Oswald going back to 1959 with his fake defection to Russia, and then lied to the Warren Commission immediately after the assassination, saying they didn't really know much about this guy. It's all been a lie. So the more time goes by, I think, you're not going to have a record that proves any of those stories that you mentioned, although they're all fascinating. There could be some truth to a lot of them. But I think if you focus on Oswald, Mexico City, and those CIA sponsored operations and that had direct links. There's 6 of them. Now there's 6 CIA operations that touched Oswald up until Dallas. So then you got to connect, that last month. Okay, he's there. You have the assassination programs that have been going on for years out of JM Wave, the CIA station in Miami. And they had Oswald hand delivered to them as the patsy in Dallas. All they had to do was carry out the crossfire.
Yeah. So there are 2 things that occurred in that Oswald was connected with that I have not been able to unravel. One is I have not read nor spoken with anybody who disputes that Oswald took a shot at retired General Edwin Walker. I guess it was maybe weeks or a month before the Kennedy assassination. Do you have any insight or take on that?
I think it's more likely that he did that. I mean, we know he didn't kill Kennedy, and I don't believe he even fired a shot in Dallas that day. That was a long time before November 22nd, 1963. It was when he first returned, from Russia and settled back in Fort Worth, Dallas in 62. And so that was much earlier in 63. And again, he had ordered or supposedly ordered the rifle from Chicago under his alias. And it's just a mess. I mean, that if anything, it shows that he was prone to doing something crazy like that. But there's not enough on that to tie it to November 22nd, but it's out there, yeah.
Well, similarly, I've never been able to really unravel or satisfy my own curiosity surrounding Officer J.D. Tippit. There were eyewitnesses who saw Oswald kill Tippit, allegedly, and he then ran down the street past a shoe store where a guy saw him running in the white T-shirt, and I don't know whether he spotted the gun or not, but saw him dart into the theater, and he's the one who supposedly called the cops and said that there was a suspicious person in the theater, and that's when the police went to the theater in Dallas and arrested Oswald. Any theories or thoughts on J.D. Tippit?
Yeah, the Tippit case has not been solved. The timing from when Oswald left his rooming house just after 1 p.m. to the now known timing thereabouts of when Tippit was shot was not enough time for Oswald to cover that distance by foot. I mean, I've walked it at a brisk pace, and you just can't do it.
To cover which distance now?
The distance from his rooming house where he went after Dealey Plaza, right? And he went in, he did get his revolver, and he left after a few minutes, and then the next thing he's in the theater. But supposedly, according to the Warren Commission, he had time to walk almost a mile the other direction, kill Tippit, walk to the theater, and that's where he was arrested. It doesn't add up. The folks that didn't make our book Chokeholds because it doesn't get to the level of proof we're looking for. But the weird part about the Tippit case, and this is where you can get back to the fact that Oswald was set up and he was an intelligence low-level asset. His wallet, he had 2 wallets on him that day. One was found at the Tippit scene, and an identical wallet he had with him in his possession when arrested at the Texas Theater. I mean, who has 2 wallets?
Yeah.
And, so that's a problem. And
I've also read, and you alluded to it, that there was an Oswald look-alike, and there are a lot of scholars who believe that there was a person that looked like Lee Harvey Oswald, and that there is a suspicion that he was in the balcony of the theater. Maybe he was the one who killed Tippit and ran down the street and got in the balcony, but it still doesn't really explain how Oswald ended up in the theater. Maybe he was told to meet somebody there or something. I don't know. That's where I haven't been able to connect those dots. I think that the real, if we want some very conclusive proof, we don't know what's going to come out in the documents. I actually believe that the proof will be there. But there is one living person that I think could shed tremendous light on this if we could administer sodium pentothal to her. Her name is Ruth Payne, and she housed Oswald when he came to Dallas. Gave him, he and his wife, a place to live for some number of months, and I have read that she is the one who got Oswald the job at the school book depository. Well, she also had a relationship with George de Mohrenschildt, who was a known CIA operative and is believed to have been Lee Harvey Oswald's handler. He had an interview at the Breakers Hotel I guess it's probably 20 or 30 years ago now, with a journalist. They broke for lunch, and he drove back to where he was staying in right down the street here from where I live, just south of Palm Beach. He was in the guest room. The burglar alarm went chirp, chirp, and then there was a gunshot, and George de Mohrenschildt was found dead just 10 miles from where I'm sitting, and it was ruled a suicide. He was supposed to go back to the Breakers Hotel that afternoon and complete the interview. He didn't make it. Ruth Payne can tell us about George de Mohrenschildt. She lives in California to this day. She's 92 years old. I would like to see an investigation reopened on some level, and for Ruth Payne to be called, and I think she could help us unravel this spaghetti, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, the Warren Commission's mandate was not to solve the case and find any other conclusion other than Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman with no conspirators. So that's why, it was her Ruth Payne's story that she was a good Samaritan, welcomed in Marina, who was on her own with kids. She taught her Russian. They had a nice little, friendly relationship. They could live together. They weren't with their husbands, etc. That's all nonsense. If you look at, like you said, her connections and her husband's connections to the CIA and intelligence, and her garage, starting with the afternoon of November 22nd and in the following days, became a treasure trove of evidence against Oswald, the backyard photos, the empty rifle sack, and the camera, and those types of things. So no, I think it's remarkable that she's alive and hasn't been further investigated on this. But that's where we're at. The any of those types of things. The House Select Committee on Assassinations, you mentioned de Mohrenschildt, his apparent suicide took place when that investigation was heating up in the late 70s. That congressional body could have solved the case easily then. It was only 15 years after. They were determined to do it. That investigation was also infiltrated by the CIA. And then they concluded that there was a probable conspiracy, but that Oswald was still responsible, and it was recommended that the Department of Justice investigate further, and nothing was done. Nothing really happened in the 80s. Then the movie came out, and then the Records Act came out, and now we are 30 years after that, still arguing over the secrecy of these records. And the only legal basis for withholding a record in 2025 is if there's a living person or a source or method, intelligence source or method, that still could be compromised by the information in these records. Just laughable to think that. So it's more of a cover-up of what happened with the agencies we've been talking about 60 years ago. And all comes back to what they knew about Oswald, who he really was, and his role on November 22nd. And then that was immediately covered up by LBJ and Hoover that weekend, as you know.
Well, and Richard Nixon got into a contentious conversation with Richard Helms, the head of the CIA, in the Oval Office when Nixon was president, after he had been elected by a huge popular majority. And so they got into a riff, and Nixon told Richard Helms that, and when it got heated, he said, "Well, I think I know who killed Jack." Well, 6 months later, Nixon was standing for impeachment. If you accept the premise of the CIA killed Kennedy, I believe the story about Richard Helms and Nixon is true. I'm willing to be open to that possibility, and and then Trump. I believe it was JFK 2.0 that he was politically assassinated in 2020. They stole this election. I don't think you could have done that without the help of the deep state. Again, the intelligence community. There's a lot of evidence about Obama having developed software programs to help tinker with elections in foreign countries. There are strong beliefs that software was used in the 2020 election and I've seen the CISA data where Trump's votes were actually decremented at 12 and 1 o'clock in the morning, and Biden's were increased. And so I want the JFK story to be told truthfully so that we can shock the American people into reality. And I don't want to do away with the CIA and the good men and women who are actually there to protect us every day and putting their lives on the line, but I want it to be radically reformed. And for everyone that works for the federal government to be working for the American people. And it's just gotten corrupt. And I think it started in 1963 when you could literally get away with murder if you worked for the government. And then you could do whatever you wanted to. I call it trickle-down ethics. You see these things happening, and every bureaucrat in America said, well, if they can kill the duly elected president of the United States, I can go screw over my enemy or political opponent or somebody I don't like, and I can get away with it. And I think it's been going on for 65 years. I think it's still going on. I think Trump realizes it too.
I agree. The CIA wasn't supposed to, it was supposed to be an intelligence gathering agency for the office of the president set up by Truman. What it became was an assassination machine in the 50s. You mentioned Nixon. When he was vice president, he was heavily involved in overseeing the creation of that assassination machine. And like you said, Nixon wanted to know all about that, more about Dallas when he was running for re-election in 72. Because he was paranoid, as he was prone to be, that it would come out that he was indirectly responsible for setting up this machine in the 50s when he was VP, that it was responsible for Dallas, and that's the short of it. But yeah, it's
well, Truman wrote Kennedy a letter and said that the agency that he created had gotten off the rails and needed to be reined in. Eisenhower went to Kennedy and told him that he thought the CIA was out of control. And so Kennedy said, 6 months before he was assassinated, I'm going to bust the CIA into 1,000 pieces and spread its parts from the Pacific to the Atlantic. And my belief is that they got him before he got them.
Well, he got in the way of their foreign policy objectives because we talked about Cuba and his refusal to go along with that. And, immediately after his assassination, Johnson escalated Vietnam as well. So,
well, let's make a date to have you back on after the files get released, and we can do a debrief, and we can see which of our theories were correct and which of them we were off base on. You and I are in complete harmony in how we see it, but you are the author of a scholarly work, Chokeholds, correct? And that is the subject of the JFK assassination. Where do we find the book, and how was it done?
Yeah, it's a great book because it holds that anything we talk about is in the book is held to a very high standard of evidence. So there's no speculation, anything we didn't think that was an undeniable truth right now. Such as that we talked about Oswald on the 6th floor, the autopsy, the frontal shot that clearly proved there is more than one shooter from the front, and other parts of the case. So in the last chapter is awesome. It talks about the 60 years of obstruction of justice in this case, which we've touched on today. So it's on Amazon. There's an Audible version too. I really encourage the listeners to follow us on X Twitter at JFK Chokeholds, because myself and our co-authors are releasing all kinds of information every day, not only pertaining to the records, but other shows and things that they really need to listen to that they may not easily find.
Oh my gosh, Mark, you're nurturing my obsession. Now you've given me more homework to do. My wife is going to be really mad at you for telling us this. Another great book on the assassination that I read that I think is really spot on is The Unspeakable by Douglas.
Yes.
And Robert Kennedy Jr. Has mentioned that book several times. And so I'm just excited about the revelations that are coming. And my hope and prayer is that it will help shock the American people, I'll say it again, into reality, and for them to realize they cannot just take what the federal government spoon feeds us, and that they've got to put their own intellectual energy into determining what the truth is. And we all as a nation have to stand. I've said to everybody that's come onto the program of national prominence, people that have the ability to make a difference, that we need to join hands and all agree, Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives. I just had this conversation with Eric Metaskis, who is an opinion leader and has written a book, Is Atheism Dead? And I said, look, why doesn't every living American put their ideology and their bias and their selfishness aside, and we just all agree that the truth is going to guide all of our decision making? And that's and it happens to be the name of our show. I just want the truth, and I want us to follow the truth wherever it leads, and that should be the basis for our decisions.
Well said, John. Well, hopefully, there's going to be a phased approach, I think, with these records. I think Trump's first order is a great start. The key will be not letting it fall back into the hands of the same agencies that have fiercely protected these records and the secrecy for 60 years now. So if the right people get involved, congressional oversight is active, there's going to be some progress on this.
Good. Well, I hope we do see it, and I hope that they don't revert to the norm. With you on the case and others, well, and Robert Kennedy Jr. in the administration and a member of cabinet, I think he's going to keep the ember stoked, and that he will help get it. And I believe that Trump is fully committed to doing it, and I think Kash Patel will probably help us get to the truth as well. So, Mark, thank you for coming on. I'm going to go get Chokehold. I'm going to listen to it on Audible. I'm glad you added that, and I'm going to go to the JFK Chokeholds. Is that .com or is it on X? Where do we find it?
JFKchokeholds.com is our website. You can see the book, but that's our same handle on X, Twitter, and that's really where you want to go right now, because our authors are putting in all kinds of updates from Congress people to our own thoughts and the interviews that we do that just keep people really up to date. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mark. And if you find yourself on the east coast of Florida, please look me up, give me a call, sure, and we'll settle all these questions over adult beverage with some suds on top of it, or I don't know, maybe clear liquid, whatever your preference is.
I'll take you up on that. I do get over there here and there, so we'll do it.
Well, I'd love to meet you in person. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on The Truth. Well, that's The Truth for today. We've told you the truth. I'm John Gordon. I hope you'll join us every Saturday from 12 to 2 on the John Fredericks Radio Network, CDM Press, 13 digital platforms around the World Wide Web, and on Rumble, Getter, YouTube, and X. Please look for us, John Gordon Truth. We'll see you next Saturday. And if you missed it or didn't get the whole show today, you got another chance. You can listen tomorrow on John Fredericks Media Network from 1 to 3. And you can always find all of our past episodes on rumble.com. That's The Truth. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week.